Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Nobody
Were you afraid for your life at that time?
I was really scared.
says it.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Like Gail King. CBS Mornings. Everything your morning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott McFarland, coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. It's good to be with you, and we thank you for joining us. Here's a look at some of the stories we're watching right now. A federal judge is willing to unveil parts of the affidavit used in the FBI search of former President Trump's home. What we learned from today's proceedings and how long until the records are unsealed. Plus, a top Trump executive pleads guilty to tax crimes and agrees to testify against the former president's real estate company. The deal Alan Weisselberg struck with prosecutors and how much time he'll spend behind bars. And the number of Americans filing for jobless benefits has dropped. The Labor Department says it recorded 250,000 applications last week, down 2,000 from the week before. And experts say the strong labor market could be helping to offset the rise in inflation. And later this hour, New York voters head to the polls Tuesday for a critical primary election. We break down the key races to watch, including details of a surprise last-minute endorsement. And a new poll suggests Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio might have a tougher-than-expected re-election fight on his hands. We head to the Sunshine State for the latest there. We begin tonight with new information in the FBI search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. A judge has ordered the government to propose redactions to the affidavit used to approve that search. The Justice Department will have 1 week to submit those proposed redactions, though it's also possible both sides or either side appeals and further extends the deadline. In the hearing, the judge said he was open to unsealing parts of the affidavit. The Justice Department also revealed the investigation is still in its early stages. Attorneys for multiple media organizations, including CBS News, pushed for the release of the affidavit at the hearing. They argue the document would help the public understand the reasons for the search. For more on all this and all the developments, Nicole Skanga joins us now. She's CBS News' Homeland Security and Justice reporter and was in the courtroom today. So, Nicole, break down what else the judge said, what else we know about the possible unsealing of this affidavit.
Scott, it's good to be with you. Here's the top line. Judge Reinhart saying he is not prepared to find that the affidavit should be fully sealed. That is what more than a dozen media organizations and their counsel were hoping to hear today, saying that portions could presumptively be unsealed. Now, whether or not the redacted affidavit turns out to be what Judge Reinhart referred to as meaningless gibberish, he says that is not on him. So if this comes out looking like Swiss cheese, the judge says that's up to somebody else. But what is clear is that the government has 1 week to turn in its redacted version of this key document that could reveal details into why FBI was authorized to search the former president's Mar-a-Lago home. Now, in a bit of a kumbaya moment, the judge in this case saying that everyone seems to agree on the law here. What is up for debate is how the law should be applied in this case, and everyone agreeing that there was a heightened public interest, of course, in this investigation. That meant, on the side of the media organizations, that the judge conceded the public should have as much information as the court deems appropriate, but perhaps to the favor of the U.S. government here, the judge said, well, this cuts the other way, too. It also means there's a public interest for an untainted investigation to proceed. One thing is clear, Scott, though, the judge holds a lot of power here. Counsel on both sides referring to him as the gatekeeper. He will ultimately decide just how much of this document the public sees. Of course, the media considering this a partial win today. All of the counsel seem to be quite happy, but keep in mind, the judge also made clear to Chuck Tobin, one of the attorneys representing the media organizations today, that he gets paid to say no sometimes.
An interesting argument the media organizations are making at a fundamental level, that they need, or the release of this affidavit is warranted because so much of the information about the investigation has surfaced in the press. How did the judge respond to that?
Yeah, there was an interesting response, Scott, from the judge. So interesting that I wrote it down. He said, quote, "No disrespect to your clients, but just because a reporter says that an anonymous source says that an anonymous source says that the National Archives said," he sort of trailed off and he said he's not sure how much weight he can give to that, questioning some of the reliability of reports that have surfaced in the wake of the FBI's search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Now, what he also said here is that he doesn't want to enter into this endless cycle where he has to become what he called an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to what has been publicly revealed regarding this probe into the former president. But of course, conceding here that due to the heightened public interest, he does not believe that the affidavit should be under full seal. He did note that this was unique. At a moment, Chuck Tobin, counsel for media organizations, brought up the Mueller investigation, the Comey investigation. The judge here saying, all I'm dealing with today is what has come before me. And what has come before this judge, at least, is an unprecedented and historic investigation of a former president, Scott.
What did we learn about the investigation? There were some puzzle pieces that came out of this process. What can we learn from those?
Yeah, Scott, you mentioned it earlier. One of the key takeaways was that we are still in the early stages here, and counsel for the U.S. government pointing out that, this is kind of still open. That's the word they use, that we are less than 2 weeks away from that FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. The court also unsealed DOJ's application for the Mar-a-Lago search warrant, and we did learn some interesting things there. 3 potential violations of federal law were revealed in those newly unsealed documents, including willful retention of national defense information, concealment or removal of government documents, and lastly, obstruction of a federal investigation. Now, that last one was a driving factor here in the decision to sign that search warrant by Judge Reinhardt. Evidence destruction was of concern to investigators. That much was clear in the courtroom today. Of course, we know the National Archives has shared some of their concerns with the former president ripping up records, reports of administration staff taping documents back together, and of course those New York Times reports about the former president potentially flushing down documents down the toilet. And so a driving factor here, that concern about evidence destruction, obstruction of a federal investigation.
You've had this thorough reporting in August about the threats against law enforcement soaring since the Mar-a-Lago search a week ago Monday. What did the judge say about the possibility of raising that risk for the agents involved?
Yeah, it's interesting because when they were sort of parsing out, both judges for the government and Judge Reinhardt, what it would look like if there were redactions made to the affidavit, the government argued that in addition to the names of law enforcement agents or federal prosecutors that they would like to have redacted, they would also request that descriptions of some of those individuals also be stamped out. So, in this instance, a lawyer for the U.S. government, Jay Bratt, said, if someone went to Quantico or what their specialty was, if they were an FBI agent, the judge said he was inclined to agree with the government on that front. In fact, Jay Bratt went on to say that because of so much amateur sleuthing that occurs, his concern is with members of the public finding details within the affidavit and using it to track down government officials that might be involved or connected in some way to this investigation, in addition to witnesses who have actively cooperated with the federal government. Now, we should point out, Scott, that this is a judge who is intimately familiar with this kind of doxing or public sharing of personal information. He himself, his home address, members of his family were circulated online after that search warrant was unsealed last week. He now has a lot of protection by U.S. Marshals. And so, although the judge here agreeing, I'm sure, based on the law here, based on some of the concerns that were expressed by the defense, this is also a judicial official who knows firsthand what some of the consequences would be of unsealing descriptions or names, perhaps, that are sensitive in this affidavit.
Well, the judge set a deadline of next Thursday, August 25th. So, Nicole Skanga, you'll likely be in West Palm Beach for a while longer. Thank you for giving us time tonight.
Thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins us now. Nobody better to talk about this than Jessica. So the judge makes this order today, or this possible order. What do you make of it?
I think possible order here is key. And we got to talk about this a little bit before, but I think one of the big takeaways is that this is potentially temporary. So what we have here is a magistrate judge who said, I'm inclined to think that there's some part of the affidavit that could become public. So now I'm putting a greater burden on you, Department of Justice. Basically, you didn't win me over just in the filings, just in the oral arguments this morning, that we're going to err on the side of transparency. And so Department of Justice, come back to me, redact what you need to redact, and then tell me based on every specific redaction why that information cannot become public. Well, I frankly am surprised that this was at least the initial decision. I think we really need to be careful because, one, the Department of Justice may end up redacting an enormous amount, so much that we end up getting virtually no useful information. And two, Scott, as you pointed out earlier today, this is an appealable decision. So either side can appeal this up to the district court, potentially to the Court of Appeals. And so this is basically an interim moment where now the Department of Justice is going to be very busy for a week. I think heavily redacting is my guess, and writing a lengthy memo to explain each and every blackout on that page.
Help walk us through those layers of appeal and walk folks through what's the difference between a magistrate judge and a district judge. This is happening at the federal courthouse in West Palm Beach, but there are different layers even in that courthouse. Help break that down.
So magistrate judges are federal judges, but they are not Article III judges in the sense that they don't have a lifetime appointment. They are appointed, I believe, for 12-year terms. Those terms are typically renewed. And what they do is help take, frankly, the load off of federal district court judges. Those are trial court judges. So they handle a lot of discovery issues. What we're seeing right now is they handle search warrants and affidavits relating to search warrants. They handle some Medicare issues, some ERISA issues. And so this decision is really a gatekeeper type of decision. Now, if either of the parties isn't happy with what this magistrate judge says, it can then be appealed to the trial court judge, the district court judge, and then it could move one level up even to the Court of Appeals. So I know it might sound confusing. You think a district court or a federal judge makes a decision, but these are the magistrate judges, I mean, no disrespect, but are really the judges that help assist the district court judges in their duties.
That being said, based on what you heard today and what you saw today, how might the judge, in this case, this magistrate judge, ultimately rule? So I still believe that we're not going to see an enormous amount of new information, just because when you listen to the arguments of what's at stake here, it's not just the safety of the witnesses, which is important enough. It's not just an ongoing investigation, which is important enough. It's not just a roadmap to where this investigation is going, but it's also national security issues. And so, again, I wish I could say I predicted this. I didn't. I frankly was surprised because I thought the Department of Justice was going to say national security, and the judge would say, that's enough for me. So in the end, I don't think we're going to end up with a bunch of new information. And let's remember, this isn't just about this case.
This is also about, do we want to suddenly open the door so that we are then revealing this information that comes, these affidavits that support the search warrants? We want to create a system where, yes, there's transparency. Yes, the public can obtain information about how the government functions, but we want the government to function. We want witnesses to come forward. We want investigations to be able to continue.
And the issue of precedence is big because, the whole country's watching what happens in this singular case, in this singular motion. Jessica Levinson in Los Angeles, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Former President Trump has raised millions off the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago, according to the Washington Post. Mr. Trump's political fundraising leapt to more than $1 million for at least 2 days last week. Sources told the Post that's a jump from about $200,000 a day in recent months. The former president has sent out more than 100 fundraising emails to supporters since the search 10 days ago. Federal prosecutors investigating former President Trump's role in the Capitol riot have issued a subpoena for White House documents. The New York Times is reporting a grand jury subpoena was sent to the National Archives in May for all materials they sent to the January 6th House Committee. This includes phone logs and the former president's daily schedule. The subpoena is not a part of the separate investigation into Mr. Trump bringing documents to Mar-a-Lago. Monkeypox cases continue to climb across the country. We take you to the White House with how the Biden administration plans to step up vaccine supply to help communities hit hardest by the outbreak. Plus, redistricting in New York has created a rare August primary for many of the state's congressional seats. What you need to know about the key races coming up. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
The U.S. has announced plans to boost the nation's supply of monkeypox vaccines. The Department of Health and Human Services says it is making roughly 1.8 million doses of the vaccine available for order next week. The U.S. currently has more than 13,500 confirmed cases of monkeypox across 49 states. Joining us now is CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. All right, Ed, with the additional doses, the vaccines coming in, what other steps are federal officials taking to try to prevent this from spreading further?
Good to see you, Scott. They're also boosting production of the vaccine and partnering with companies here in the United States to manufacture and package it and get it out as quickly as possible. They are responding now here in the Biden administration to accusations in the LGBTQ community among state and local leaders that perhaps the Biden administration didn't move fast enough to get enough vaccine supply out there with huge demand, 13,500 cases, as you said, but pent-up demand to get the vaccine in order to protect against possible spread. The other thing you're going to see in the coming weeks at the more local level is the Biden administration, federal officials partnering with local and state health departments to be at or to provide, information and testing at essentially, as it was described, pride events, gay pride events across the country. There's several coming up in the South, for example, that they cited. And they're going to focus especially on places where those that are most affected by this, more than 90% of the people who have it are men. Their average age is 35, and it is predominantly the LGBTQ community that is, been hit with this. The goal is to have federal officials partnering with state and local leaders to get the information out there, to test for it, to provide vaccine, and make sure people are following up eventually for a second dose once it's available. Either way, they're trying to stave off concerns that they didn't react fast enough to this by starting now a series of briefings, as they did during the COVID-19 pandemic, where federal officials brief reporters on a regular basis about the progress.
On a different issue, a supportive group of the president's is launching this $1 million ad campaign to promote the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. I want to show part of the messages before I ask you about them.
Joe Biden promised to deliver for working families over special interests. That's what the Inflation Reduction Act does. Lowers prescription drug costs for millions of families. Lowers healthcare costs for millions of families. Lowers energy costs for millions of families. But every single MAGA politician voted against it, because when it really matters, they're on the side of special interests.
All right, Ed, $1 million doesn't buy a ton of airtime.
Nope.
So what does this do for the president's approval ratings?
It is part of a $35 million campaign that's been underway since last year. This group, Building Back Together, is sort of unique in the political space in that it was established by Biden campaign veterans, Biden allies, to essentially promote his policy, that he wanted passed and that has been passed by Congress. It sort of fills a void that Democrats feel should have been there back in 2010 when they passed the Affordable Care Act and then did a miserable job, they would agree, in selling and explaining it to the American people ahead of the midterm elections. This campaign, as it will expand over the course of the fall, plus millions of dollars now being spent by other left-leaning organizations, the League of Conservation Voters, for example, Third Way, that promotes moderate Democrats, are starting to unspool pretty vigorous campaigns in several states across the country with advertising similar to that. It's designed to literally give air cover on the air, in the digital space, on the radio, to Democrats as they go home over the course of the next few weeks to start explaining and defending what's been passed, not only the Inflation Reduction Act, but also the gun and mental health bill that was passed earlier this year, the bill designed to buoy the semiconductor industry, even the Infrastructure Act last year. Will it help Democrats? Well, if you look at recent polling, as unreliable as it may be in August, it is beginning to show that Democrats are creeping up or perhaps ahead of Republican candidates in some key races. And whether it's affecting the president's approval rating, as I've said before on this program, I don't think we'll get a good gauge of that until closer to Labor Day, once this advertising, once the other travel and messaging done by these Democrats starts to sink in.
So he's in the afterglow of this signature moment. Where is the president this week? What's he up to?
He's on vacation, Scott. I got to say, this is the longest stretch we've gone in sort of not seeing a president in a while. He spent about 6 days in South Carolina on Kiowa Island, and then came back here, of course, to sign the Inflation Reduction Act quickly on Tuesday, but then headed off to Delaware, where he's spending the rest of this week through next Tuesday. At least that's the current plan. So it's a roughly 2-week break. Look, most Americans get about 2 weeks of vacation. He's taking a bunch of it right now. White House aides point out he didn't get much of a summer vacation last year, and no matter where he is, he can still be president. But it is interesting that after COVID, that isolated him here at the White House, and then this vacation, it's been about a month since he was really out there on a regular basis. And yet, Scott, what does it say that his numbers may have stabilized and maybe in the process of turning around now? It's a message, perhaps, that this idea the Biden administration had coming in, or Biden aides had coming in, that less would be more, that a less present president in the lives of Americans might be what the country wants, may bear out here in the coming weeks. We'll see. He's going to hit the road. He's got stops next week in Pennsylvania, for example. At some point, he's got a visit to Ohio. We know that's on the schedule later this month. And it'll pick up again later in September as he goes out to do what other Democrats are doing and talk about the things they've passed. But for now, he's getting some R&R. We should point out he tested negative today for COVID-19. The First Lady is still in South Carolina, recuperating from her bout of COVID. She apparently, according to aides, joined some meetings virtually as she prepares for the new school year as a college professor over in Northern Virginia.
Oh, yeah, school's coming. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very much.
Take care.
Voters in New York will choose nominees for November with the state's primaries Tuesday. From Midtown Manhattan through the snow belt in the state's North Country, there are some hotly contested races next week. In just the past 24 hours, there's been a debate in New York City among candidates and a set of unexpected endorsements for Democratic candidates by former President Trump. Perhaps the most contentious Democratic primary is the New York 12th District, a face-off between two of the U.S. House Democratic Caucus's most experienced and most powerful leaders, Oversight Committee Chair Carolyn Maloney and Judiciary Committee Chair Jerry Nadler. In some potential 11th-hour meddling, Trump issued an endorsement for Maloney, saying, quote, "She's a kind and wonderful person who's always said terrific things about me and will support me no matter what I do." Trump also endorsed Democratic candidate Dan Goldman in the nearby 10th District. Goldman, you may recall, was a staff attorney for House Democrats in Trump's first impeachment trial. What do we make of the meddling in the state of these races in New York? Let's bring in Marcia Kramer, chief political correspondent for CBS New York. Marcia, it's great to have you here. What do you make of the Trump endorsements?
Oh, this is Trump making trouble. And it's, it's sort of ironic. Instead of playing on his popularity, he's playing on his lack of popularity in those two districts and trying to make trouble, thinking that if he endorses these two people, it will cost them votes, especially in Goldman's case, because Dan Goldman has been endorsed by the New York Times, which in that district actually plays a very big role, especially since going to be a low turnout race.
Just strikes me, as somebody who's covered the Hill for a long time, to see Jerry Nadler and Carolyn Maloney facing off against each other. What is your latest read on that race? It has a lot of ramifications here in Washington.
Well, believe it or not, I actually think that absentee ballots are going to play a big role in this race because a lot of people in that district, they like to vote, but they also like to go on vacation, and they probably got absentee ballots. But the thing that's happening in that race is that Jerry Nadler was able to get Chuck Schumer to endorse him. He also got the endorsement of the New York Times, two things that are usually expected to play a big role in that district. And a lot of people are wondering why Chuck Schumer, who decided to take sides, given the fact that almost no one else in the New York delegation decided to take a side in that race because they're two very important, very popular people. But here's the wild card. There's a younger person, Suresh Patel, who actually challenged Maloney several times and almost beat her once. And he's hoping to make the case for generational change. So you could lose one powerful person in Washington. You could also lose two.
Big race is Tuesday, but for the general election, that race isn't terribly interesting. Democrats going to win that seat no matter who wins the nomination. In the Hudson Valley, to your north, in the suburbs, the 17th congressional district is interesting. What's your latest reporting on that race?
Well, Scott, the thing that happened is that Sean Patrick Maloney is actually according to polls, ahead in that race, although he's being challenged by, a progressive. The thing that's interesting about that race is not so much that race, but also what happens in the general election, because he's being challenged by a very popular Republican state senator. So the question is, does he win this race? By the way, he's being endorsed by a lot of important people, including Congresswoman Nita Lowey, former Congressman Nita Lowey. But does he end up losing to a Republican if there's a Republican wave of sorts in the suburbs of New York, which, it could happen.
What other races are you watching, Marcia?
Well, I'm actually paying attention to the 16th race, which is in Westchester and the Bronx. The district was redrawn. Jamal Bowman was the congressman. He's one of the most progressive people in the Congress, and he has aligned himself with AOC and the Squad. Now, he, at the time, he was elected, represented a very liberal Bronx district. They moved his district to a lot of more conservative places in Westchester. And interestingly enough, one of the candidates, Vidat Gashi, has been getting the endorsements of a lot of the power brokers in that state, including the former congresswoman there, Nita Lowey, the congressman that he beat, that Bowman beat, Elliot Engel, and also a number of mayors and other policymakers in the Westchester Democratic establishment. Now, what's interesting there is that I think that the Westchester officials are trying to guarantee that somebody who actually comes from Westchester represents their interests rather than somebody who comes from the Bronx part of the district.
One quick big picture question. Kathy Hochul, running for re-election at the top of the ticket, already won her primary. Is she raising the odds for Democrats, or is that race more competitive than we think?
I actually think it's a very competitive race. It's really hard to tell, right now because it's August and people are not paying that much attention. But her Republican opponent, Lee Zeldin, has used very effectively the issue of bail reform and also the congestion pricing issue, which is not popular not only in the suburbs, but it's not popular anyplace else in the rest of the city as well. So it depends on what happens. I think that, if there's a big crime incident in October, it's going to help Zeldin. She's trying to argue that abortion is a really key issue, and they need to have her because she's a woman, and she'll make sure that as a Democrat, the right to abortion will be maintained in New York.
The expert of New York political reporters, Marcia Kramer in New York. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
A Florida judge rules portions of the affidavit regarding the search warrant for Donald Trump's Florida home could be released, pending possible redactions. Catherine Herridge has more on today's proceedings next and what we could learn in the coming week. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Scott McFarland. Here's a look at some of our top stories. The Biden administration's Monkeypox response coordinator says 1.8 million more doses will be available to order starting Monday. A new initiative is also on the way to distribute the vaccine at large events geared toward communities at the highest risk for the disease. Plus, U.S. home sales dropped in July for the 6th straight month. Sales of previously owned homes fell 5.9% this month and 20.2% from a year ago. Mortgage rates have climbed in response to the Fed raising interest rates. And a Florida federal judge is willing to unveil parts of the affidavit used in the FBI search of former President Trump's home. But he's giving the DOJ 1 week to make redactions. Deborah Alfarone has more from Washington.
A federal judge in Florida is ordering the government to take steps to release the legal document that supported the warrant for the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. Major print and broadcast media organizations, including CBS News, asked U.S. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart to release the affidavit over the objection of the Justice Department.
Judge Reinhart seemed to have a very good sense that it is his job as the gatekeeper in this case to perform his function of balancing the interest in the public of accessing these materials against the interest in the government in keeping them secret.
The DOJ says making the affidavit public could serve as a roadmap to the government's ongoing investigation, chill future cooperation by witnesses, and harm other high-profile investigations.
They tell us that the investigation not just is at the beginning, but what they expect to do later on, why they think that the obstruction of justice statute was in fact violated.
The judge is giving the government until next week to propose redactions to the document and says he is not prepared to find the affidavit should be fully sealed.
In a separate legal battle Thursday, the former CFO of the Trump Organization pleaded guilty to 15 counts of fraud and tax evasion.
Alan Weisselberg is accused of receiving more than $1.7 million in off-the-books pay from the Trump Organization. As part of the plea deal, Weisselberg may be called to testify against the former president's company in a related trial. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Washington.
For more, let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Catherine, talk about the significance if the judge allows part of this affidavit to be unsealed.
Well, Scott, in 99% of these cases, the courts decide in favor of the Justice Department, or they defer to the Justice Department. So this alone is very unusual. What we can also conclude is that media organizations, including CBS News, were successful arguing that there was a very high threshold for transparency. And the judge in this case found that the Justice Department had not met that threshold to keep all of the affidavit secret and away from public view.
The judge set this deadline today, but do you have a sense of either how much of this affidavit could potentially be uncovered or really when the rubber hits the road on this?
I mean, I don't want to speculate for folks on the timeline. What we know from the court is that the Justice Department has 1 week to black out or redact the information that they think is national security information, might reveal the course of the investigation or identify potential witnesses or the agents involved. And then the judge will have to make a decision as to whether they accept those redactions and decide to make the affidavit public. There could be an appeals process before it's all over. So what does the public get to see at the end of the day? We spoke with a former federal prosecutor who said there will probably be some sort of tantalizing details and background about the investigation, but it's not going to get to that core, which is what we're all interested in. And he said one of the most revealing elements actually may just be how voluminous this affidavit is, because that would tell us a lot about the kind of information that's already been gathered about these alleged violations of mishandling classified information and obstruction.
Yeah, we know in these federal criminal cases or federal investigations, affidavits can range from a one-page boilerplate to voluminous pages by the dozens, and this is likely somewhere in that wide range. We did get a sense today, though, of what's in it. Explain why.
Well, there was sort of that top-level argument about whether the affidavit should be made public, but then sort of at that secondary level, we heard from a senior Justice Department official who's in charge of what's called counterintelligence in the National Security Division that there was evidence of potential crimes that they were looking at. And in the records that actually were unsealed by the judge, what are called procedural records, it says that there were 3 statutes here: retention of national defense information, concealment or removal of government records, and also obstruction of a federal investigation. And these records also indicated that there was deep-seated concern that evidence could be destroyed at Mar-a-Lago. And that gives us kind of a sense, Scott, as to why there was this urgency and potentially why the judge decided to sign off on this extraordinary decision to search the home of a former president.
Just to get our bearings here, this is all uncharted waters, right?
We have never been here before. That's correct.
Tireless work today. Catherine Herridge, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Two-term incumbent Senator Marco Rubio isn't facing a primary opponent Tuesday, but a new poll shows he might be feeling the heat nonetheless in Florida. We head to the Sunshine State to explain coming up. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital.
We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct. Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell them I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The anticipated Democratic challenger to Florida Senator Marco Rubio is already ahead of him in at least one poll. Florida Congresswoman Val Demings is expected to win her primary Tuesday and then go on to face the incumbent Republican in the Senate general election in Florida this November. Demings is leading Rubio by 4 percentage points in a head-to-head poll conducted by the University of North Florida's Public Opinion Research Lab. For more on the race ahead of the primary, Jim DeFede joins us, investigative reporter for CBS Miami. Jim, from what you're hearing, what you're seeing, is this a real race? Is this competitive and close?
I think it's getting more competitive. I don't know if I necessarily believe the University of North Florida poll, but I will tell you that both the Rubio campaign and the Demings campaign are using it in fundraising. Rubio to say he's got a real serious race here and he needs all the financial support he can get. And Val Demings in trying to convince Democrats that she is a viable candidate, that Florida is not a state that has gone completely over to the GOP and that she can actually pull this off. I will say that the issue that I think is galvanizing a lot of Democratic voters has been the recent ruling on Roe versus Wade. I think that the Demings campaign saw some life from that and is really capitalizing on that to try to draw a comparison between herself and the current senator.
Also Tuesday, two top-line candidates, including a former governor, competing for the right to run against Ron DeSantis in the gubernatorial race. What's your sense of that?
Well, is it the right to run against Ron DeSantis, or is it sort of a Pyrrhic victory? Do you win that race and then get to go up against a candidate that has $130 million in the bank, as Ron DeSantis has, high approval ratings? So be careful what you wish for in becoming the nominee. But yes, that is the top line race that we're all keeping an eye on, is Charlie Crist versus Nikki Fried to see who will be the Democrat. Charlie Crist, a former Republican governor, a current member of the House as a Democrat. Nikki Fried, they really represent two distinct wings of the party. The Charlie Crist campaign believes that the only way to beat Ron DeSantis is by appealing to the middle and hoping to break off some Republicans who find his approach to be too conservative, whereas Nikki Fried is arguing that the only way to challenge a conservative like Ron DeSantis is to heighten up and excite the liberal base of the Democratic Party and get the Democrats to show up by appealing directly to them and not trying to play so much to the middle.
So he's in this re-election cycle, but we keep seeing Governor DeSantis campaigning outside Florida for other Republicans. You're reporting,
you've noticed that, have you? Yeah.
It's hard to miss that, Jim. So what's he saying about a possible presidential run as he makes these out-of-state visits?
Right. He just recently was in Arizona campaigning for officials there. Again, kind of a strange move when you're up for re-election in 80 so days here in Florida. Look, everyone knows it's the worst kept secret that Ron DeSantis aspires to be president of the United States. He has not ruled out the idea of running in 2024, but he has not said that he will be running. He says he's focused on this, but on running for governor. But yet, when you go to Arizona, when you travel around the country, giving speeches and lectures and doing fundraising all over the country, and helping other candidates, it seems like your focus is a little bit broader base, and I think that's what we can draw from that.
When you were watching these primaries 4 years ago, you saw the many candidates trying to get the Republican nomination for governor, and the Trump endorsement meant so much to Governor DeSantis. Where's their relationship now?
Well, let's be absolutely clear about this. Without Donald Trump's endorsement, Ron DeSantis would never, period, end of story, never have gotten the Republican nomination and therefore would never be governor. He was completely dependent on President Trump lifting him up and promoting him as the ideal candidate. And so he then won the nomination and a narrow victory for the governor's race in 2018. Fast forward 4 years later, their relationship is a lot different. Clearly 4 years ago, a Donald Trump endorsement was critical. Today, Ron DeSantis has made it clear he's not even asking Donald Trump for an endorsement. Now, the theory there, I would imagine, is that if you asked Donald Trump for his endorsement, Donald Trump would in turn ask for a commitment not to challenge him in a presidential election in 2024. And I don't think Ron DeSantis is willing to give it. So therefore, he never even asked for it. But Ron DeSantis has built his own base. He's curried a lot of people. He is clearly the heir apparent to whatever Donald Trump's legacy is, and may very well challenge Donald Trump in a primary in 2024. That's really going to be the interesting thing. I will share this with you. I had one politician down here tell me that Republicans more and more look at Ron DeSantis as their version of John F. Kennedy, that he's got the beautiful wife, the beautiful kids, the lawyer, the military record. They see him in those terms. And when you watch him travel around the country, he builds that excitement. So for those who are tired of Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis is positioning himself as the alternative.
On the ballot in the primary Tuesday ahead of the general election in November, Jim DeFede. Good luck Tuesday. We'll watch for your work then.
Thank you.
A federal judge has reinstated a North Carolina ban on abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy. An injunction blocking enforcement of the ban was lifted Wednesday after a judge ruled it conflicted with the Supreme Court ruling striking down Roe v. Wade. The 20-week abortion ban has limited exceptions for medical emergencies when the mother's physical health is at risk. Democratic Governor Roy Cooper says he disagrees with the ruling and remains committed to protecting reproductive health care in the state. Meanwhile, in South Carolina, the state Supreme Court has temporarily blocked a so-called fetal heartbeat abortion ban. That order halts a policy that prohibits the procedure once a fetal heartbeat is detected, which could be as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. It comes as legislators debate a near-total abortion ban that advanced in South Carolina's State House Tuesday. That proposed legislation would outlaw the procedure unless the mother's health and safety are at risk. We're going to take a quick break, which means you have a couple of minutes to download the free CBS News app. On all your devices, you can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. And while you're at it, you can check out Paramount Plus. We've got a mountain of content for you to stream there as well, including your favorite shows, movies, and sports.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the
And
past?
to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme,
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
The U.S. and Taiwan will start official trade negotiations this fall as tensions between the island and China remain high. The U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade will hone in on 11 trade areas. The negotiations aim to enhance regulatory cooperation and to deepen ties with Taiwan. The announcement comes after China announced troops will travel to Russia for joint military drills in 2 weeks. China says the exercises are, quote, unrelated to the current international and regional situation. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the
And
past?
to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before. That's correct. Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme,
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it. Drew Barrymore.
Hi, guys.
Mira Sorvino.
Kristen Bell, baby.
Miss Lopez and Mr. Maluma are Reggie.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Is this a date or are we just friends?
CBS mornings, starting at 7. Nobody
Were you afraid for your life at that time? I was really scared.
says it
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
like Gail King. CBS mornings, everything your morning should be.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamie Yukas. Thank you so much for joining us. Here's a look at the top stories we're following right now. A federal judge has signaled he's willing to unseal at least some of the affidavit tied to the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago. We'll have more details from the court hearing. Monkeypox cases are on the rise across the U.S., but the federal government is trying to get more vaccines to vulnerable communities.